Welcome back. We are in a new month. It is March. We're talking about family dynamics, right? So when you get through, you're thinking about your purpose, your values, your strengths, your weaknesses, yourself. Then we're going to broaden out to your nurture, right? So everything from February is your nature, the things that are inherently in you. And any person that has children will tell you babies have personalities by like 6 months. There are certain things that are just inherent to us. But there is also nurture, right? That is nature versus nurture. This is all about your nurture, right? And the first place you're getting nurtured, for good or for poor, is in your family. So if you have never clinically, critically looked at your family, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? And this is hard. People do not like to think like this. They don't want to think about themselves. They don't want to think about their families. And I am here to tell you, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't think about how you showed up in your family, how your family showed up for you. That's the first dynamic, right? So, because we all have roles that we fall into in our families, right? For a very long time, I fell into a role that was like the secretary. Like I was always doing the things, I was always setting meetings or taking care of things like that. And just because my mom didn't like to do it, and so I did it. We fall into these roles without realizing it. So I want you to think about it. The tricky thing where siblings are concerned is that birth order tends to be a factor or an indicator in personality and in how you relate to your family and your siblings specifically. So I really want you to critically consider this for yourself. I've already done it. This isn't for me. This is for you. So here we go. When you're thinking about how has your sibling dynamic shaped you, think about your role in your dynamic, right? And you're like, it was just me. I was an only child. So it would be, how was your lack of sibling dynamic, right? Only children tend to be a little bit easier because really, when you're an only child, you're either very, very close to your parents or you're usually very, very close to your friends. That's kind of how it goes. Then, or you can like lose yourself in activities and hobbies, but really, when you're thinking about only children, we'll talk about this on the next slide. When you're thinking about only children, they either get very, very close to their parents in such a way that they are kind of treated like an adult from the outset, or they're treated so much like a child that they're very distant from their parents and they kind of want to be away from their parents. So that's how, to think about. If you are maybe a firstborn, and we'll talk more about this, maybe you ended up being the protector. Maybe you ended up being somebody who babysat other people. I know when I was growing up, there was a family of 10. The oldest siblings babysat the youngest siblings, and so it's like, what ends up happening is you stop being a child and you start being a caretaker. And that shapes how we show up in life. And I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying it is. And we all need to examine it for ourselves, right? So older siblings, if you're an older sibling, if you're a firstborn sibling, perhaps you've heard this before, I'm sure, that you're kind of the experimental child. You're sort of the guinea pig. There's truth to that. The last child, let's say if there's 3 or 4, is like, well, I'm an old hat at this now. Parents are like, not as worried. The firstborn might have had so many strict curfews and restrictions, and the lastborn might have been like, yeah, I didn't really have to worry about any of that. And every family is different. Middle children, again, maybe they're the peacemaker. Maybe they're the funny one. Maybe they're the one that gets bypassed. Maybe they are rebellious so that they do get paid attention to. I don't know. I only know my own sibling dynamic and anybody I've worked with, right? So it's for you to figure out. To help you do that, I found this, I did not create this. Found this on Google, guys. Found this on Google, not mine. But see if this makes sense for you, right? I know for me, I am all of those things as a firstborn child. I've always been a perfectionist, a high achiever, always been a leader. I try not to be bossy, but probably always responsible, very motivated, sort of internally motivated to be successful, to achieve. If you watched the Pick Your Poison that I did the other day, I was talking about ambition, and I know I have that. I am reliable. I've always been that. Of course, I did also have things that were kind of like an only child thing, which was also perfectionist and mature. And I did seek approval all the time. I always wanted to make my mom proud. I watched, this was a unique dynamic of growing up in a essentially single parent household. Not entirely, but kind of. We had a weird 10 and 2 custody split where 10 months of the school year we were with our mom and 2 we were with our dad. And so I tended to take on responsibility to try to make my mom's life easier because I watched all the things she was doing for us and I hated to see her suffer. And that was just me. I just took that on. That was the thing I did. I wanted to protect my siblings. I wanted to take care of them. I think I was 9 and I was like, Mom, I can watch the kids. She worked night shift and I hated being at my grandmother's. And I was like, I can watch them. I was 9. They were 8 and 7, and so it was just a matter of like, not just sibling dynamic, also birth order has to do a lot with how you show up in your family, but also like what comes up with your parents, which we'll talk more about this whole month. So no worries. If you're a middleborn, are you, to be perfectly honest, I grew up having people pleasing tendencies and rebellious tendencies and all the things, but some of that was because of society, right? Like I felt left out and was rebellious and was a people pleaser because I was societally rejected from a young age. And so some of those things that I took on were not actually natural to me. I just took them on as defense mechanisms. Whereas a lot of times we do that because of our birth order without even realizing it. Not always, but again, I want to offer you food for thought so that you are thinking about these things because all of this plays into who we actually are versus how we've shown up our whole lives. And so lastborns, this is again, not always the case, but I want you to have food for thought about it, uncomplicated. Maybe you're social, maybe you are low key, maybe you are more relaxed, more fun. I tend to find, and this is more often than not, I would think, firstborns tend to be far more serious and toward the back end of birth order tend to be far more relaxed. That's I have found that to be true. But again, every family's different. Every person's different. What is it for you? Right? While you're thinking about this, once you're like, oh, okay, this is how I showed up with my siblings, or, oh yeah, I was a protector. Think about how that helped you. The responsibility that I took on, which was way more than I probably should have, really helped me develop a great work ethic. You don't have to worry about me working. I like to work, I have to learn how to play. I have to learn how to like calm down. Of course, there's the balance that I didn't have, which I'll talk more about in the next slide, but sibling dynamic can definitely help in a lot of ways. Everything helps us in some capacity and might harm us in another. So think about how your sibling dynamic, or again, lack thereof, helped you. For me, I definitely took on a lot of responsibility. So I was very comfortable with being reliable, dependable, showing up, good work ethic, things like that. That was all very, very helpful. I also was good at taking a lot of heat, handling a lot, I don't know if this is helpful or harmful, but I really took it upon myself to try to protect my younger siblings. And nobody asked me to do that. I just I loved them so much. I didn't want anything to happen to them. I did a lot of homework assignments for them. I was good at school, especially my more younger sibling. He didn't care for school, and so I wanted him to graduate. So I would do some work for him. I wanted to help however I could. And it helped me play to my strengths for sure. But again, how is it for you? How has your sibling dynamic helped you to show up differently? Again, we want you to be critical here, critical insight to yourself and to your upbringing. So think to I don't know, specific instances. This happens a lot. So when we were kids and we would drive down to North Carolina with our dad, I would always sit in the front seat because then I could kind of be a buffer in between my dad and my siblings, and so think to those moments, were you ganged up on? Was it a 2v1? Were you in the 2? Were you in the 1? Or if you don't have a sibling dynamic, think about, did that mean that you got to be included in more adult conversations? Does that mean you were ahead of your peers in intelligence and maturity? Does that mean that you got to decide your own bedtime? These are the things that we want to think about, right? If you were the middle child, did you get to be the peacemaker between your siblings? If you were the last child, did you have the ability to take it easier or be more laid back? I mean, these are all good things. I'm going to just really quickly go into how did it hurt you, right? How is your sibling dynamic hurt you? This is another thing, because again, anything that pain and pleasure are two sides of the same coin, help and harm are, very, very depends. So like something that helps you in excess could easily harm you. Working out is good. In excess, it could easily cause deterioration and problems. So that's true for anything. For me, like I wanted to protect my siblings so much, I probably didn't let them experience the shit that they needed to, or at least some of it. There was a time where this was actually more to my mom, but I had broken my collarbone and my sister saw me and I was like, don't tell mom. I was 14. You think she's not going to find out? Because I thought I would protect her. I was so protecting. I was in such a protection mentality of I don't want anybody to worry about me in my family that I kind of would a lot of times bypass my own needs, which there was a lot of harm that came from that in a lot of different ways. I won't even get into all of it for my own self, but how does your sibling dynamic work against you? I was too much a protector. I was too much going out of my way to try to make things easier for other people. I probably took on too much responsibility. I internalized so many things. I put pressure on myself to such a degree to show up. And part of that is just me. I'm responsible, reliable. And part of that was like really detrimental where it's like, why are you forcing yourself to do things and be things and be put in situations that like you don't need to be in? That's what I ended up doing. Right. So that was harmful. There's also, this is a tricky one. If something happened to one of your siblings when you were growing up, like if you lost them as an example, that is that's a very harmful thing, because now where you were 2 or 3 or 4, you feel like something's like missing in a big way. I have found that is a really, really, really tough situation when you lose anybody, for sure, of course, but it definitely tends to have a very detrimental impact on siblings when a sibling is lost. Honestly, it has a really detrimental impact on the whole family dynamic when a child goes before a parent. So that if that has happened to you, something tragic like that, if there's a sickness, if you've ever seen like My Daughter's Keeper, that's it's extreme. If you read that book by Jodi Picoult, it's an extreme case where she was born to be sort of a donor for her sister's illness. Again, extreme case, but if there were any health issues growing up, or if that, person needed all the resources, that is something to pay attention to. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not anything to be ashamed of or upset about. It's just something to acknowledge. Like, hey, yeah, this happened. So this person got all the attention and I didn't. I don't begrudge them for that, but I am saying it changed how I showed up maybe, or how I internalized things, or whatever the case. This isn't about being a victim. This is about being aware and accountable, because maturity starts at the age where we start being accountable for all of the things that happen in our life, right? Maturity starts at accountability. So you reviewing critically, right, with the sort of unbiased lens, just trying to understand your upbringing. That's not woe is me, this was so hard. No, that defeats the purpose. It's not going to help you. But if you're like, okay, yeah, no, this did happen. This absolutely happened. And this is what happened as a result of it. I think that's what we're looking for here. We want critical awareness. We want to grow that awareness. And so when we think about our siblings, there is so much there, because every family has different dysfunction, honestly. I think it was, it's a Russian author, maybe Tolstoy. I think it's Tolstoy, who said, all families are alike in their unhappiness. I'm not quoting that right. I think I need to look it up just so I can get it right, because Tolstoy quote about family is what I'm going to look up, guys. Tolstoy family quote. It popped right up. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Right? And again, that's Russian literature for you, so there's that. But really, I don't want to say there's no such thing as a happy family, and I don't want to say there's no such thing as a well-functioning family. But I do want to say that when we have any family dynamic ever, roles get very mixed. There's almost always role confusion in families, because it's like, especially with interrelational, I don't want to say conflict, but interrelational relationship. Sometimes you guys are friends, sometimes you guys are siblings, sometimes you guys are protectors, sometimes you guys are roommates, sometimes you guys are housemates. Like, there are so many different ways you can show up. In my case, me and my sister were both on the same athletic teams, right? And there's so many different ways you can show up. And so, it's an important thing to think about. So, sibling dynamics, you want to really start coming into awareness on yourself. First off, listen to February. Second off, pay attention in March, because we're just discussing family dynamics and there's a lot there to discuss. So, hope that is helpful. I hope that you have a good time thinking about that. Like, subscribe, share, reach me on Instagram if you want to talk more about it, at Nicolina Eichel. And, really do the work here, guys, because it will help you immensely into kind of getting that brain in gear and looking at things a different way. And that's so important for awareness. So hope this is helpful. I'm going to keep bringing it to you. Enjoy.